what we call the 12 levels in the martial arts. And I wrote a brief post on this. The post is available on my Facebook page. It's also available on our Telegram group. What I want to talk about is specifically, what that is and means. And so, what that is, not like the 12 areas of Kali, but similar in approach. Our understanding of the way martial arts is taught and learned, and maybe why, well, not maybe, why it's been taught that way for centuries, at least, decades, at least as long as I've been involved in martial arts. They've always been taught a certain way. And what that means is that we usually start off with, apart from forms, with a defensive movement. Let's just say blocking, parrying, slipping, dodging, ducking, that kind of thing. Then you'll also have offensive movements, and those will be strikes. Let's just use boxing as a base format. You have a jab, a cross, a hook, an uppercut, an overhand, body hooks and head hooks, different kinds of uppercuts, different kinds of jabs and crosses. But let's just stick with the simple basics. Then if you talk about a weapon-based art, you have thrusts and slashes. If you talk about a blunt weapon, you're going to have horizontal and diagonal strikes and thrusts and pokes. If you're talking about an open hand art like Wing Chun or many styles of karate, you're going to have also chops and palm strikes, elbows, kicks, knees, and different types of those. Those are strikes. And your defenses may be blocks, right? Parries, inside and outside. Shrugs or covers. Of course, bobbing and weaving. And slipping side to side and ducking. Those are defensive motions. So offensive motions would be considered strikes. Defensive motions would be considered parries, blocks, even include slipping and dodging. That's base. Now, we have to consider something else. And many people may talk about this and may consider it, but let's go into this a little bit. When you teach your strikes and your defenses, then you must include unorthodox style of attacks that may be utilized by people that are not trained or are trained specifically to attack with intent to cause severe injury or death. Let's just say you're talking about someone that's going to be an ambush predator or possibly even an assassin, someone that's going to just do that for one reason only. Oftentimes, those attacks are not in any way similar to the attacks that we in an organized martial art would practice. We don't practice those kinds of strikes. And if we do, they may be limited to the strikes that may be conducted by a vagabond or a ruffian, someone that's just a troublemaker, out to cause trouble, beat people up, bully, whatever you want to call that. Now, the next thing we talk about, after we talk about how do they strike and how do they defend, because their defenses may also be wildly different from your common, ordinary defense as described. Parries, blocks, shrugs, slips, ducking. It may be wild movement of turning the body and moving in very odd ways, very unorthodox manner of defense that are not often is now something that is totally unexpected and unusual in manner of defense. And at some point, I will get around to making videos based on that kind of thing. So we've talked about now how we attack and how we defend. We talked about how they attack and how they defend. Now, they means anyone but the style that you study. So let's just suppose that you're studying a Filipino martial art. You probably have a numbering system that takes anywhere from 5 strikes up to 25, even up to 60 or 67, whatever that number is. And those are going to be your strikes. Go to another system, they're going to number those different. They're going to probably look the same for the most part, but they're going to number them different, and they may do them based on the weapon type they use. This is where the Inosanto 12 areas comes in, because that is describing and teaching different configurations of weapons and different combinations of weapons, including empty hands. So that's an organized martial art. And like boxing, you're going to have a lot of different schools of boxing, but they're all going to throw a jab, cross, hook, and an uppercut and an overhead. And some of them may throw different kinds of strikes as counter strikes, body strikes, whatever, but you're going to have a generalized feel for that if you're a boxer. And then if you are studying a form of karate or Japanese traditional art or silat, you're going to have a certain number of strikes that are very characteristic to your style that you study. That's what we're talking about. How do you attack? Now, how do they attack? How does the guy attack who just stepped off the bus, right? He just landed in your little world, and how does he attack? How does he defend? How does he move? It's going to be different than what you're used to. So study other martial arts from the standpoint of, what do they do? What are they going to do to me? How do they move? Something Musashi wrote about in the Book of Five Rings, and look at that, and he talks about that. He was also a wild a man himself. So now when we are moving to what we call level 2, so attack and defend level 1. They're both level 1. It's not attack is level 1 and defend is level 2. It's not defend is level 1 and attack is level 2. You could probably try to categorize it that way. But what I would tell you is, how do you have a defense if you don't have a strike? If no one's striking you in a particular way, how do you choose to defend that strike? You can't. So you have to have a base set of strikes to defend. Simple enough. Now, the next category we go to is what we refer to as the riposte. The riposte is what you do after you defend it. So we're going to Now take our defense and throw a strike based on where that defensive motion places us relative to the opponent. For instance, if you just duck and you go under the strike, you may be in a position to throw a punch with the same side hand that you move to. If you use a defense, you may make a strike with the opposite hand that you defended with. Very simple stuff here. Nothing too complicated, nothing out of the norm of what you just did in level 1. You're just using them like that. Defend and strike, defend and strike. Whatever strike that you learn to throw, defend that and then strike with the natural tool. And that would include for the unorthodox strike, what is the natural tool now? Where is it positioned to throw the best strike that's the most efficient? That's what you are studying when you do a martial art, martial science. So the riposte is, in fact, that combination of defense and attack. Not the same as a counterattack. A counterattack is executed simultaneously, either directly and contra to the attack, or what we would call a linsil da, which would be a simultaneous defense and attack. Now, counterattack could be what we refer to in Filipino martial arts as a sagang or gunti. That could be to the limb. It could be referred to as a split entry, which is defend and hit. It could be a cover and hit, right, or shield and strike simultaneously. It could be, very similar to a slip and hit. So if you're boxing and you throw a punch and I slip left or right, I can throw a punch left or right. If I duck, I can hit in conjunction with that slip or duck, which you didn't do. You did the slips and the ducks and the defense part, but you didn't add a strike to it. That's another level, because if you're not competent in the defense, you won't be competent in the strike. And that's what we have to understand. It's going to be based on your ability to execute it. So if you want to train at a high level and you don't have base skill, forget about it. And this is where I run into trouble a lot of times in myself when I'm teaching. I forget to teach at the level of the people in the room sometimes. I've been guilty of this, traveling to do seminars, and I have a bunch of things I want to show this wonderful instructor who brought me in, and I realized then halfway through the first hour of the seminar that I am, and this is not to be taken as braggadocious, but I'm teaching at a level that the students are not able to receive. And this is a mistake now. Now, what I've done is made a mistake, and that's hard to recover from and back down without insulting the students. And I made this mistake several times in doing seminars outside of my school and really even inside my own school. So making this chart was partially helping me understand myself how better to teach in that way, in the way that the student will best receive and retain the information. Because what good does it do to teach a person on a level they're not able to receive? Now, it might be 10 years later, this kid who's 25 now understands at 35 what the hell you were talking about. It's happened to me many times with my instructors teaching me and then 20 years later, I go, oh my God, what a fool I have been. He was trying to teach me this, and I couldn't hear it. I couldn't understand it. I just wanted to trap or do whatever, disarm or whatever it was I wanted to learn. Not understanding what was being taught probably was better than what I wanted to learn. So we have to understand this part of it. So now we've covered levels 1 and 2. Attack, defense, and riposte. There are many levels to those, but that's the base level. Then we talked about counterattack. That's level 3. Because by the time you've practiced blocks and strikes and riposte, you should be competent enough in those techniques and skill sets to put them together into a counterattack. Once you can put them together into a counterattack, now we have to talk about this. We have to say, what are we thinking about? We're allowing the opponent to dictate. So then what we talk about now is the preemptive strike. What Bruce Lee termed strike on preparation. What does that mean? Or we could say strike on the intent. So when the opponent signals intent, we can strike now. Now, you get into some kind of argument here with people that are going to say, well, legally, you might be on shaky ground. That's why most people will go ahead and teach defensive actions and ripostes almost only, because those are, if you defend first and then attack, almost anyone reasonably would say that's self-defense. You were attacked and then you defended, and then you defended yourself by striking after that. So that is a big reason why that's taught. And morally, then you also have the high ground. The preemptive strike is on shaky ground morally, because the person hasn't actually struck yet. They're just signaling the intent to strike. This is where you can gain a certain advantage, provided you're in the right environment. But let's leave that out, because we're just talking about martial science and martial art. We're not talking about what you're going to do the next day in court. That's a whole nother fight that we've got to discuss later. So when the opponent signals, what does that mean? So he put his hands up. Well, that's one good signal he's going to strike you. And this is what we would call, in Wing Chun, we term that as capturing the bridge level. Now, the other thing would be, and most likely, it's the loading of the weapon. The step back, the turn, loading the shoulder, and then the launching of the attack. Or it could be the draw, when they draw their weapon and begin to point it at you. It's preemptive if you strike then. And that would be advisable in situations where your life is certainly at risk. And that's a known thing. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, hey, there's a question of whether he's grabbing his wallet or his pack of cigarettes or whatever the hell they may reach for. We're assuming now, when we're talking about this, that they're drawing a blade or a gun, or they're drawing back to strike you, or they're putting their hands up with the intent to begin to punch you, which people don't often do. It's silly, but people don't do that. They'll throw a punch and then their hands will come up, if at all. So it's not like in the martial arts school. So preemptive strikes are utilized when the opponent signals intent, or when he prepares to attack. So Bruce Lee used the term attack on preparation. We're using the term when he signals intent. It's the same idea. Preparation would be the loading. Intent would be, right, he's drawing the weapon and he's starting to present it. That's level 4. Level 5 now is where we leave people behind. Now, as I stated in the written advertisement, whatever you want to call it, it's just a little post, written post. Level 5 is often not taught. It can be. It's in the JKD 5 Ways of Attack, but it's not often taught. It is, however, utilized by people who have enough fighting experience. What this means is drawing an opponent into your sphere of influence, whatever you want to call that. I want the person to reach for me, so it's easier for me to hit them without preparing. I can do that by creating an opening in my defense in order for them to see an opportunity. Whatever that looks like, and I've got videos out on that already in the Finland 11 DVD set. We discuss that in quite length and demonstrate it more appropriately. It's demonstrated. So that would be level 5, is drawing the opponent to you. Level 6 is baiting. And what is baiting? I'm going to avoid the joke. What that does is I place something well within reach of the opponent in order to entice them to attack. It's like drawing. They're cousins, but it's not the same thing. Drawing would be creating an opening. Baiting is sticking something out there, maybe even your stupid head. I used to use it all the time when I fought in competitions with sticks, because you're wearing a helmet and you're not going to usually get hurt by the strikes. I would stick my head forward, getting the person to reach for it, and I would get them with an uppercut under the arm. At that time, the arm guard was on the outside of the arm and the elbow, leaving the inside of the arm well exposed. So if someone swung at my head, I could hit them with an uppercut strike and disable their limb. I mean, it would be brutal. And it is brutal because after doing it in 3 fights in a row, someone did it to me. And it really hurt, bro. It just destroyed my arm. So that's the difference between drawing and baiting. Baiting, you're giving them a significant, it's a higher risk than drawing, for sure. And it's more easily taught with a weapon structure, within a weapon structure. So that's something to think about. But it can be done in boxing too, and people do it all the time. You'll see them do it. Muhammad Ali did it very well. He both drew and led and baited people, using footwork primarily as his defense and bombing and what he called rope-a-dope. Now, the next thing is number 7 is probing. Also on this, I'm going to avoid a joke, but you'll hear this in all types of military, and it's even used in psychological, like interrogation, stuff like that. So probing is to establish the tendency of the opponent. In other words, how does this person defend these false attacks? You want them to think it's real, but how do they move? How do they defend their head? How do they defend their body? How do they defend against a left or a right strike, or a forehand or a backhand strike? The next thing we talk about now is leading, which is the cousin of probing, but a lead is much more risky to the person executing it. And usually, if the tendency is established, will draw a commitment from the opponent, allowing you now to follow up successfully on that action. And you may even turn the motion itself into the counterattack, or we call it counter time. You can use it both offensively and defensively. Then we start to talk now about what we call level 9. Is we use the term patience, and this now we've entered a whole higher level now, where people understand leading and probing and baiting and drawing a little bit easier than they will what we're going to talk about now, because now we're up to here with people, and really with most people. So we're up to here now, and we're going to talk about things that are, we're not talking about fighting in the physical terms of what kind of strikes to use. This is completely psychological. So patience implies that I will not allow my opponent to use any of the previous deceptions to get me to show my tendency in how I will attack or defend. Gonna need good footwork here. Okay, very precise movement. And so it is just that you don't be drawn into an engagement that's going to be contrary to your skill set. And I want to switch a little bit over here to my work, and I'm going to use this analogy. I was working one night at a event, and it was after hours event. People were drinking, partying, having a good time. My attention was called to an individual who was, let's just say it was misconduct. I didn't observe the conduct, but I became aware of his tendency to do that and began to observe him. When I saw the behavior, I approached to get him to knock it off or leave, one or the other. I wasn't going to seize him at the moment, but later on it would get worse. I walked out onto a dance floor to confront this subject. I'm armed, and for all I know, everyone in the places, we're talking about Texas now. Confronting this individual about his behavior and his conduct, realizing now I'm surrounded by a dozen or so of his cohorts, his people that he'd grown up with his whole life, even though he was definitely, even in their own view, out of hand. They weren't going to be on my side. And I realized that I had made a mistake and been drawn into a conflict that was not in my favor and wasn't going to go my way if I allowed it to escalate. So I had to use a different approach to draw down my own level, which is extremely hard to do when you're in that situation, because you can, psychologically, you're losing face if you back down. Once you've brought it to this, you can easily feel emotionally that you are losing face, and that gets a lot of officers in trouble. Anyway, I manipulated that situation to my advantage and then made another approach. Learned a valuable lesson there, which my student Dwight had told me before that not to do that. But I was not in the moment when he was giving me the advice on that particular subject. So patience is so important. I'm not going to go to 10, 11, and 12 on this video, just for a time constraint right now. I've got to get off the device. So I hope that you can utilize this information. And I know it's a long video, and I didn't intend it to be this way. And I just intended to go through it really as quickly as I could. And that's really about as quickly as I can go through it. And really, I would need about 30 minutes on each of the next 3 items to get to level 12. So I'm going to back off of this. Hopefully you understood what I'm talking about. Share this with your friends. This is something I've been working on for almost a full decade now. Thank you.